Hello, everybody. Welcome to Maker's Bar. I'm your host, Troy Goldenberg. Today, I'm here with Eitan Fischberger. He's a comms analyst and expert who has written in the Wall Street Journal, for NBC, The Hill, and many other publications. Very excited to learn his journey and his story and everything today. Eitan, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. So, as you know, but our viewers don't know, I have been following you on Twitter for some time now, X for some time now, and very impressed and love what I'm able to read from you and hearing your leadership thoughts, so to speak. So, again, thank you for our Maker's Bar, where we talk to leaders, but I would love to hear how your journey began and however you want to start that. You can start it from childhood, you can start it from high school, college, time in the IDF, whatever it may be.
Okay, so I'm not going to go too far back because that'll bore your audience to tears. But basically, make a long story short, I assume just because naturally it'll flow this way. But we'll talk about the Israel stuff and a lot of the ways that I help, or I try to help the way that I can, Israel and the Jewish people, and also Western civilization, which seems to be going through a bit of trouble right now. How I help them through my writing and through my work. So that all kind of started. So I guess I could kind of divide it into this gradual process and then this like one moment that made it all happen. So I think it was Hemingway that said things happen slowly, and then all at once. So that's kind of like what happened with me. So my grandfather has a lifelong history in Jewish activism, and not just Jewish activism, but activism in general for helping people in need, helping other communities, a lot of interfaith dialogue and activities. His name is Rabbi Avi Weiss. For those who don't know him, he was one of the leaders of the Soviet Jewry movement in the 1970s, 80s, I guess it was. And he's still, he was like this guy who would whenever there was a community in need, he would block streets in New York, all coordinated in advance with the police. It's not like the protests that we see nowadays where they're just shutting down entire parks in NYC and chanting for the genocide of Jews. These are people that he was leading these protests in coordination with law enforcement and just trying to raise awareness of the plight of Soviet Jewry. He would chain himself to the UN building in New York when he thought that there was an injustice going on. He would, whenever there was God forbid, a terrorist attack abroad, he would go and he would fly abroad and he would do what he could there. Whenever there was an attack, in a church in the U.S. or in a mosque, he would be there, just extending a hand and doing what he could to help heal the communities. And so that really moved me from a young age. And I thought, wow, like if I could be a fraction of what this amazing man is, my grandfather, then I would love to do something like that in my own way. And so that really, and I continue to be obviously in touch with him all the time. And we have a wonderful relationship, and he continues to be an inspiration to me. And we've written a few pieces together, which I'm very proud of and very grateful of. And so that kind of started me on this path of thinking maybe this is something that I want to do. And then the quote unquote moment that I was like, okay, I'm really going to do this. This is actually, it's a very random moment that happened. I was serving in the IDF during Operation Protective Edge, which was the Israel-Hamas war in 2014. And I was a technician on the Iron Domes. That was my role at the time. And I saw just in the culture of the IDF and in all the directives, everything, I just saw how much we tried and continue to try to avoid civilian casualties, despite the inevitable tragedies that will happen in war, in any war anywhere, unfortunately. And I saw how much effort we were putting in to do what we can to stop that from happening, and to not, if there was even a shadow of a doubt that it wasn't going to be a good hit and there was going to be too much collateral damage, we wouldn't do it. And then I just saw people just going on the news and going on social media. I wasn't on Twitter at the time, but going on social media and just demonizing us. And it was too much for me. It was too much for me. And here's the random part. I saw an interview. It was more of a debate on CNN between political commentator Ben Shapiro and another political commentator, Peter Beinart. And they were duking it out on CNN. And I thought, wow, maybe this is something that I would do as like part of my actual work, or just something that I'm doing on the regular. Obviously, I prefer to be behind a keyboard typing than doing a podcast, as your audience may be able to see. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started on this journey.
Very cool. I've actually spoken with Peter Beinart before,
Oh
not on
yeah,
the Mentor platform. This is on my own platform back when, I mean, I'm still independent. So I'm not being paid because bar, but back when I was very much getting started, and I was using
rock
X
on.
to, yeah, I was using X to reach out and find people, as I still am, obviously, speaking with you today.
It's an amazing way that you could just
Yeah.
use X to just reach anyone. I mean, I've had conversations with people that I never thought in a million years I would reach on
No,
X.
absolutely, absolutely, and I could go down a whole rabbit hole of X. I mean, it's a really bad place, but when you use it to your advantage, and when you use it in a certain way, it can be such an incredible place.
Absolutely.
You get to meet with people, like you said, you never expect to be able to talk with, and I responded to one of Peter's points, which I disagree with Peter a lot, but I responded to one of his points,
Same.
and apparently it was enough of a good point for him to want to respond back, and I was like, hey,
Oh wow.
I'm not here to. You don't know me, and I know this is Twitter or X, where everyone's kind of, it's more of a Roman Coliseum than it is a marketplace
To
of
put
ideas.
it lightly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm here for the marketplace of ideas and to speak with people and to try and get to what's right and good. And if you want to talk about this, let's talk about this. And then he was friendly enough to come on for an episode.
Nice.
Yeah, so anywho, it's cool that was one of those moments for you. I was like, hey, I want to do this. At what age? So you said you did some pieces with your grandfather. At what age did you get into comms and writing in particular?
So the writing was something that kind of always came to me pretty naturally. I wasn't, formally trained, if that's I don't even know if that's a thing. But I went to school. I studied for my BA. I did a BA at Reichman University in Herzliya in Israel. I live in Israel, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. And my grandfather is from New York. I made Aliyah, which is how we say moving to Israel, in 2004 when I was 10. I'm now 29. And I studied for my BA in 2017. I learned counterterrorism and public diplomacy were my specializations. And during that time, I just realized, wow, I'm actually a half decent writer. Maybe this is the way that I could do it. Yeah, it kind of just spiraled from there.
Very cool. And throughout this journey, was there a point, maybe like one opportunity, or maybe a few? I mean, at this point in time, but maybe one or two opportunities that you're like, oh wow, this is kind of like I made it moments. Like I've noticed that you wrote for the Wall Street Journal, as I mentioned before, or anything like that.
No, I mean, I guess because I don't think I've made it yet. Whatever that means, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know how would I even know when I made it. But I just there are all these sort of like seminal moments. These what are they called in English? I forgot the word in English. These milestones. That's the word.
Milestone. Yeah.
These milestones that you reached. That I was like, wow, this is really cool. So I mean, the first mainstream, or what I would define as mainstream publication I was published in the U.S. was the New York Daily News, which I think is a really important paper because it hits a really important demographic. That, I would argue that the New York Post is perceived as pretty right wing and the New York Times is perceived as pretty left wing, and I think the New York Daily News is a very sort of middle of the road, maybe center left publication. I think that's a really interesting demographic because I think you find often these very hyper polarized media outlets. And, they do that so they can get more clicks and whatnot, and they have an agenda, who knows. But I think the Daily News is a really good outlet. And so that was the first publication that I had. So that was a moment where I was like, whoa, that's really cool. Because up until then, I would be published in Jewish media and in Israeli media, which is amazing, obviously. But it's a totally different target audience with a totally different, I write pieces differently, different style, different subject matter, different sources, different everything. It's very important to tailor. The first question I always ask is like, who's your target audience? And then from there, you sort of tailor the piece accordingly. So that was a cool milestone. A cool milestone was my first podcast interview. A cool milestone was my first time on the Maker's Bar.
Appreciate it.
Sure. Listen, when you're with 2 million followers on X, I can look back and say, guys, listen, I was I was with Troy.
I appreciate that. I hope to
Sure,
be that one day.
absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I hope to continue to have those moments of like, wow, this is so cool. I can't believe I'm actually doing this. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm sure you will. Um, as you move forward, I guess like this could have changed too. So you could say in the beginning of your writing career versus now, maybe how you're going to see it change, take it any way you want. But as you move forward, what has been like that underlying mission? I'm very curious here. So like, I know that each piece is different. Each piece with the target audience, the point you're making for each piece, obviously is going to be different. But is there an underlying foundation, underlying mission of what you're trying to accomplish with your career here?
sure. So I mean, my overarching goal is, I mean, I think I alluded to it at the beginning, is to help what I think is Western civilization, which includes the U.S., Western Europe, the Jewish people, the state of Israel. I think all of them are going through a bit of a crisis right now in various different ways. Israel, most obviously, with this sort of existential war that it's fighting now against, an army of Iranian proxies on all of its borders and within its borders to an extent. The Jewish people are obviously facing an unbelievable rise in anti-Semitism that's reached unprecedented levels, and obviously the Jews are the proverbial canary in the coal mine. So you can tell a lot about the health of a civilization based on how it treats its Jewish population, and I think that, I mean, that's just one of the symptoms that I think are facing Western civilization in the U.S. in general. But with what I try to do with my writing, I'm going to go off on a tangent, is to just sort of help
Do.
bring truth to the issues. No, but when I go off, I could really go off. I have to like ground myself. Um, to try to do what I can to help out, to spread the truth of what I think is happening. What the issues facing our societies are, and how to combat them, and how to fix them, and how to get them back to what they need to be. That's sort of the overarching goal, and that takes different shapes depending on, I guess you'd call it, the mission at hand. So I've had this weird affinity since October 7th, which was obviously the horrific massacre that Hamas, terrorist organization, perpetrated against Israel. And since then, I've had this weird thing that I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to play this role where I've helped expose certain journalists and media outlets that have been, uh, expressing opinions that I think are unacceptable for someone who claims to present themselves as an objective journalist. I've never claimed to present myself as an objective journalist, or a journalist for that matter. But they'll say, "Oh, wow, this is an amazing massacre that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th. This is great. Glory to the resistance." And then you'll see them writing for mainstream publications, like they're employed journalists at Al Jazeera or whatever. I mean, it's not a mainstream publication, but you know what I'm saying, like a big platform. And I'm like, this is unacceptable. Everyone knows it's unacceptable, and it's good to thank God for social media. We spoke about social media before, so the internet is forever. Even when you think you delete something, guys, it's never really deleted. People like me and people much more talented than me have ways of seeing what happened there. And so I've helped expose them and to a small extent, I think, raise awareness of this issue. And I have no idea what the point I was trying to make was.
No, you're good. So I actually have a few things there. So you say you
Please.
wouldn't describe yourself um, as an objective journalist. I'm curious,
Or
how
a
would you
journalist.
describe yourself, or a journalist? So how would you
Yeah.
describe yourself? I mean, I know it says comms expert and analyst. If you want to
Yeah.
like what that means in particular, and then after this, I would love to touch on social media, because you just said thank God for social media.
Thank God for social
That's
media.
not a commonly uttered phrase, so I'd love to touch on that too. But first,
It's
how would
often
you?
said. It's often said by people who are very much on social media. So
Yes,
you'll see people
true.
going, you'll see. I love my grandparents. I love my uncles, and they're always like, oh man, people these days they're always on their phones. Huh? They say as they're staring into their phones. I love you guys. Um, so okay, let's start with the first thing. So what am I? I guess I would characterize myself as a I used to have a background in the what I would call the pro-Israel arena. I used to work for a couple of organizations that work to ensure transparency, fairness, objectivity, accountability within the media. It's called CAMRA, the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis. everyone should go follow them on social media. And then I worked for an organization called NGO Monitor, which basically works to expose, I would say that the flagship mission is to expose the links between quote unquote human rights organizations and terrorist organizations. So think like UNRWA, the UN's body that works to help Palestinians, so to speak, which I don't think it does at all. I think that they have many links to terror, which we can get to maybe at some other point or in a subsequent podcast. But I worked for NGO Monitor, doing communications for them. They're excellent. You should follow them as well, everyone. And then I worked, I had a brief stint in it for a couple of years in tech. And now I'm on my own path, charting my own path, doing independent consulting work, strategic consulting, communications consulting, things like that. And so that naturally overlaps, obviously, with a lot of the mission that I'm working towards. As far as the second question that you just asked, but that I already forgot, social media, right? That was it, social media?
Yes.
Okay, so social media. Why thank God for social media? Social media is like many things in this world, I think, and I'm just kind of going off the cuff now, but it's like this amazing tool which can be used for what Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility. So you can use social media for enormous good, and you can use social media for enormous bad. As far as the bad, I don't need to go into it. Everyone knows, but it's a way for people to show the worst that humanity has to offer, because you're in front of a screen, you're not talking to a real person, you're talking to a computer, so you can say whatever you want. You can call people Nazis and you can curse them out, and you can say awful things about their family. You can call them racist. You can call them genocide supporters. You can call them whatever you want, and it doesn't matter because it's just a person, and you can do it anonymously too. So what do you care for smearing someone because nothing's going to happen to you? You're just an anonymous guy behind a keyboard. It also has the potential for enormous good because you can show the truth to the world. There's many reasons that it's good. Obviously, keeping in touch with your friends and your family. Most of my family does not live in Israel, and so social media is an amazing way for me to feel like I'm close to them because I miss them dearly. But as far as my mission, it's an amazing tool that allows me to reach people that I never would have reached before. We would have never connected if it wasn't for social media, right? Maybe we would have. It would have been great too, but I'm skeptical. And so it's just really nice to be able to give a voice to the voiceless. Even if you think, not taking it to its drastic extreme, you think about a lot of the protests that are going on in authoritarian countries where people are rising up and exposing truth about what's happening. Let's say in Iran, for example, I think is the most, the golden example. You see people filming the protests, filming what's happening, filming the atrocities that they're facing, and it's I'm hard pressed to think that we would be as aware of what was going on if it wasn't. Think about. I'm going to go the most drastic example that I can. Think about like the Holocaust. Imagine if the Jews back in the 40s in Europe had social media. Maybe they would have done something. Maybe they would have helped us raise a voice.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. And I agree completely. I just don't hear it a lot. Because what you hear on the other side.
Well, it's fun to be negative. It's fun to be negative. It feels this,
It gets you more clout.
First of all, it gets clicks. First of all.
Yes.
Which just speaks to the issues with human nature in general.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, no, it's very, at times it's very black pilling, which is a term I didn't know 6 months ago, but
what is that?
So there's the red pill and the blue pill. A black pill is It makes you feel hopeless. Like things like you're ingesting so much reality that you just feel hopeless. Like, there's nothing we can do. And at times it does feel
that's horrible. Who made up black pill?
I have no idea who made it up, but I've definitely felt that way at times, just going through social media. And just listening to conversations, even like other podcasts. I've been studying Israeli history and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for years now, like years. Just been a hobby and interest of mine, and been having these discussions with people all across the spectrum, from Palestinian civilians to Palestinian journalists to Israeli civilians and journalists, and just everyone in between. It's just something that I've wanted to find the truth in and, be a part of the solution. But even like the conversations, Lex Friedman is somebody that I came across a few years ago.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he
He's
has really
great.
interesting.
I think he's
He just had a
very great.
5-hour debate with was it
So
Benny Morris, Norman Finkelstein? Everyone's
this
seen
is
that
what I was
debate.
referencing. So
Yeah,
so
okay.
that's actually what I was getting to. Is like even watching that conversation, I was like, oh my
It was
gosh, this is
riveting.
really. Oh my god, I there were times where I thought, oh, this is great. It's a good 20 minutes. But there were a lot of times I'm like, man, if I just tuned into this and I didn't know anything about this conflict, I was like, oh, this is never gonna get better. Like, and it just seems to be one side yelling at another side and not listening. And although I think Benny Morris I'm very grateful for that human. I think he handled himself very well.
He did. I also the thing about Benny
but
Morris. So that I mean, this is a free conversation. So
yeah,
Benny Morris. So there was Norman Finkelstein kept insulting Destiny, who I'll call Steven because I'm going to call him Steven. He kept calling Steven. He kept messing up his name, like Mr. Borelli, Mr. Bonelli, Mr. Bonellis. It was hilarious. And then he started insulting him. And so, in Israel, when we're insulted, we usually just kind of laugh it off because words are hilarious sometimes. They can be really funny. Sometimes people my name is Fischberger, right? So I'll just the elephant in the room. My name is kind of funny. I love my name. I'll never change my name. I'm grateful for my name. But it's not like a standard name. So I can empathize with people like kind of having a joke at your name. And so when Norman Finkelstein started making fun of Steven and his last name going, "You're such a fantastic moron." And Benny Morris was cracking up the entire time. And it was the cutest thing in the world. I don't know if that's like too professional to say about a guy like Benny Morris, who is one of the most incredible, brilliant, renowned historians probably ever. But he was just like cracking up at Norman Finkelstein yelling at Steven Destiny. It was actually the funniest thing in the world.
Sometimes that's the way you handle it too. You have to laugh. Like, it's interesting how emotional these topics are, and they are. Like, everyone I know, including myself, have friends who've been killed during this conflict, family that has been killed during this conflict, and
I'm sorry.
That's good. Thank you. But like on both sides, right? And I would count myself as one of the fortunate ones who I've had one friend during the conflict being killed, and I have friends and acquaintances on both sides who they've had to choose which funeral to go to because there's just too many funerals, and it's just like it's very disheartening and sad, and the ability to be able to smile through it and be able to laugh. Laugh at.
You don't have a choice. There's always a time to cry, right? But you can either laugh or you can cry, maybe a little bit of both. But you have to laugh. You really do. Israel was just I don't know what the heck these rankings are based off of, but Israel was just named one of the happiest countries in the world again, and people kept saying so. I mean, I kept seeing these responses online of how the heck could Israel be one of the top 5? It was either number 4 or number 2, I think. One of the top 5 happiest countries in the world in the wake of everything that happened. And it's a totally fair question. But I would argue that in some twisted way, it's kind of because the things like this happen that we are able to see that, the joy in every day that we have, just to get like super deep for 1 second, the joy that we have and the blessing that we have for being here. And even though it's ugly and, it's really hard and there's just all these, the conflict, which feels like it's intractable, but I refuse to believe so. You have to just hope and laugh and live. And I think it's dafka. Dafka is a word in Hebrew of like, it's because of what we've faced here in Israel that we're able to sort of maintain our mostly positive outlook on life.
That to me, that makes sense.
I wonder if it makes sense to anyone else.
I hope so. There was a saying that one of my Israeli friends told me one time, and I've heard it repeated since actually. So now I'm pretty sure it's a real saying. It's not just him telling me.
No, we'll give it to your friend. We'll give it to your friend.
Yeah, but he says, in Israel you laugh, in Israel you dance, in Israel you celebrate, because tomorrow you never know. And I've heard it, maybe not those exact words, the exact way, but I've heard that repeated a lot since then. And I think it's true. I think part of the crisis, so as you mentioned before, there's definitely different types of crisis happening in the Western civilization world, and part of it in America is a crisis of mental health and anxiety and depression amongst our young generation. I'm actually right on that order of Gen Z and millennials. I'm a zillennial. Um, and yeah, so I see it in my generation. I see it specifically in people my age and a bit younger than me.
Mhm.
Don't really know teenagers anymore. I'm 27 now, so I don't really know many teenagers anymore, but other than my own cousins. But I saw it growing up. I see it now, still today, in a lot of people, and um, I really do think part of that is social media. Part of that is just we are so lucky over here. We live a world in America that is in 2024 that is unlike any time before. It's a very privileged. I mean, it's better no matter. I wouldn't say no matter what, but basically no matter who you are living a life that is better than 99% of any human ever to ever live. And human beings, we create our own trauma, and even
Yeah.
whether you go through like what I would call trauma or what someone in the Middle East going through a war would call trauma, we're all going to kind of go through it in a way. And I think the fact that we've lived such incredibly privileged lives and don't know anger and pain and loss, speaking generally,
Hmm.
that people in Israel or Palestine or anywhere, many parts of the world know, it has this weird perverse effect on us. And I really do think that's part of it. I truly think some of the happiest people in the world, if not most of the happiest people in the world, have gone through terrible things and just don't understand the miracle um, that is Western civilization, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
it it's a weird contradictory thing. It really is.
There's a lot of dissonance, yeah, but it makes total sense to me. I mean, so I'll talk about something about Israel, and then I'll talk about the West. I'll respond to what you're saying. So there was the Jewish holiday of Perm that just passed a few weeks ago, and I saw this really powerful post on social media that I never would have seen otherwise. It was the photo from someone's house. This woman, this poor woman, her husband. They have a couple of kids. Her husband was murdered on October 7th by Hamas or by another terrorist organization that invaded that day. Um, and there was a lot of debate in Israel. What do we do? Because Purim is the holiday where it's I'm not going to go too into the holiday, but it's a very, very celebratory holiday. You're supposed to dress up. You're supposed to be joyful and cheer and give out candy to people. It's sort of like a less creepy version of Halloween, right? Because there's candy, there's dress up. It's a lot of fun. And and you party, and people were like, okay, well, we're in the middle of a war. There are people that are still hostage. There's how many hostages are left in Israel? I mean, I think there's 130 something hostages, Israeli
Yeah.
hostages, and not just Israelis, by the way, Americans and other nationalities as well, held hostage in the Gaza Strip by terrorist organizations. How are we supposed to celebrate a time like this? How are we supposed to celebrate anything? And there was a picture on social media of this woman who lost her husband in the attack, and on the entrance of her door, she held a sign that she posted a sign that said it was in Hebrew. I'll translate it roughly. It was something like, you know, this house, and everyone knows her, like everyone in the community knows that she lost her husband, so it's not, the message has significant resonance. She said, this is a house of joy today. We raise our heads high. If you're walking in this house, you better not be sad. I don't want to hear any frowns. I don't want to see any frowns. I don't want to hear any crying. This is a day of joy, and we're going to celebrate. There are beautiful kids in here. And she was something like, we have to be thankful for every day. It was a beautiful message, and I was very choked up hearing it, because I mean, that takes unbelievable resilience, and an unbelievable outlook on life. So, to the woman who will probably never see this, I don't know who you are, but wow, what a message. As far as what's going on in Western civilization and in the U.S. and what you were talking about, a lot of it's interesting. How am I going to frame this? I was thinking of a smooth way to transition what you were saying into this whole concept of like the oppressed victimhood complex that's taking place in America right now. How a lot of the people that are so unhappy, they also perceive themselves as these perpetual victims, and you see it a lot in the. I mean, this is not a very smooth transition, but I'm already in it, so I apologize.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people that are protesting nowadays in the U.S. they're acting like they're so victimized. They're living in this colonial, systemically oppressive landscape in the U.S. and and they're sort of like mirroring themselves with what's happening with the Palestinians, and they're saying we're perpetual victims. We can't get ourselves out of this, and not to get into what's going on with the Palestinians in Israel, because that's an entirely complicated geopolitical conflict and ethnic and religious conflict. But in America, like you said, like guys, you're living in America. America is incredible. I mean, the cliches about America: land of the free, home of the brave, the land of opportunity. Like, I truly believe that that's still the case, and there are issues in America, of course, but guys, like you could do it. Especially a lot of the people protesting are people that are highly educated and the most prestigious universities in the world that anyone would kill to go to. And so for them to talk about how they're oppressed, I'm not buying it. Are there stripes and hardships in your life? Absolutely, everyone has it. But are you oppressed?
That whole ideology has taken on. It's really risen, and I've heard a lot of theories, and I believe the theories actually that I've heard of. This kind of started in the '60s, where this was implemented during the Cold War, of like this Marxist ideology, this victim ideology, and there's lots of KGB agents. There's lots of quotes actually of the damage is done. Now we just have to wait for the fruits to show. And I think you fast forward 60 years, and a lot of the students that learn these things have been professors for 20 years now or so, and and now the kids are 20 to 30 years old, and you do see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, a lot of the stuff specifically in the universities is that you see that it's it really is like a long-term plan. I mean, you can kind of draw a line. I've written a few articles about this in National Review and City Journal about the sort of. I mean, there's various actors that are funding a lot of these universities for, I would argue, nefarious reasons, and they're pumping billions of dollars to these universities. They're buying departments, they're buying textbooks, they're buying whatever, you name it, and there's evidence that they're funding these universities, and we know what they're injecting these universities because they're coming from the state itself. So you'll have Qatar that's funding billions of dollars into American campuses. What are you doing there? Why are you China's doing it, Russia's doing it, everyone's doing it, Saudi Arabia is doing it, and it's it doesn't seem organic to me. A lot of this, it seems so carefully crafted. A lot of the student groups that are active on the campuses, a lot of the other groups that aren't exclusively student groups, but that are active in sort of this arena of fomenting this victimhood complex of this, we're colonized, oppressed complex. A lot of it is coming from entities with ties to foreign actors, and I think so. I definitely see this sort of long game being played here.
Yeah, I can as well, and kind of grounding us back into Maker's Bar leadership. What can you see that would give you hope? What are some course correcting things that you see happening, or that you see could happen? Where should we go from here?
As far as concrete measures, they're not too original, but we need increased transparency as far as getting a handle on this complex that we have in the Western civilization. I think that you need to sort of understand where it's coming from. So understand who's these things are. I think that they're funded. These narratives are funded. I feel like it's really, there's a concerted effort to implement them into the discourse, whether it's on social media or whether it's universities, whether it's whatever, you name it. I think we need to understand where it's coming from, because without understanding where it's coming from, we can't actually fight it. We also need activists on the ground to continue to advocate on behalf of Western civilization and these ideas, on the ground, meaning on social media, on campuses, on in articles. I mean, there's podcasts, by the way. I wish I could give some sort of like catch-all, this is how we're going to do it, but I think it's just sort of a lot of different things build off of each other, and eventually with enough grit fortitude and we'll call it ingenuity, we'll hopefully be able to get it done.
I think we will. And in my mind, I think you do see a pivot. Obviously, think everything happens slowly. Everything happens very slowly, and that's just the way of the world. But everything is also destined to change. And I think I've seen a pivot in a general cultural attitude, and maybe this is anecdotal.
When did it? Yeah, when do you think it started though? This pivot.
I think it sort of started. I'm a podcaster, so let me take it out from a podcasting realm. I'm a podcaster.
Go for it. Everyone in their expertise, absolutely.
Yeah, so a podcaster today. So let me take it from a podcasting realm. I think when you saw the rise of Joe Rogan, so he was popular. I never heard of him far after he was probably the biggest podcaster on earth. I still hadn't heard of him, and I think most people hadn't heard of him. I think really his breakthrough moment, ironically, kind of came when he started getting attacked. So around COVID times, and I'm
Is
sure
is that when the attack started? I mean, I guess that's the first time I heard of him as well. Yeah,
around that. So he had many experts on before, and I'd heard of him a little bit before COVID. And I'm sure though there was a time, some point in 2014, 2015, whatever it was. I think the Trump era was kind of like a big.
Well, I mean, it coincides with the explosion of alternative media, right?
Yes,
that was Joe Rogan.
Exactly.
I mean,
So
he was the leading
yeah,
force.
I think that'd be a better place to put that. So alternative media. So what I saw what happened with him is that he had some experts on, which I don't really listen to him, but when he has experts on that I like, so he recently had Jonathan Haidt on, who written some of my favorite books I've ever read in my life. So I'm gonna go listen to that. So when he has people like that on, I'll listen. So I was starting to listen to him a bit, and then all of a sudden, and he had plenty. I just a handful of experts that were very like pro-vaccine and just like, hey, here's what's happening with COVID. And this one guy on who helped create the mRNA vaccine, and all of a sudden, he's on CNN. Joe Rogan on CNN, and it's this doctored video of what he had posted because he had mentioned, hey, I got COVID.
Sounds about right.
And I got COVID, and here's everything we did, and he did 1,000 things and he in the video was weird. It was like, I don't know what worked. I have no idea what actually worked or not. Maybe I just got lucky. Like I don't know. But he said the words ivermectin, and they
oh sure, I remember this saga.
So they focused on that. All of a sudden there's a big blow up, and now everyone's heard of Joe Rogan.
Right.
And now he's just a super famous household name.
And what's amazing about I see the cultural pivot that he's the cultural pivot that Joe Rogan is causing, and I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that he's willing to have conversations with people from all the sides of the aisle, talking about whatever subject needs to be talked about. There's nothing censored. It's brilliant. And I think just props to you, Troy, because I've been looking into your work as well, and you do the same thing. You have people from various different perspectives, and I think that's a really that's the way to do it, and it's something that you don't really see too often in mainstream media. So I think that the alternative media and what you're doing, what guys like Joe Rogan are doing, I mean, he should reach your heights one day, Troy. Amen. I think that's key. So I agree. There was definitely a pivot.
I appreciate it. And just to finish, to get to the point of that.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. I love podcasts because we get to be able to talk about sports. So to get to the end point of that was a moment in time, and that I don't really care about the whole COVID debate. It's not of interest to me, at least of major interest to me. I'm happy to talk about it at some point, but I saw that kind of moment into like, oh, well, the current system has been crumbling, and this was like a big threatening moment to them, and all of a sudden there's all this rise of more Joe Rogan type people, and now we're dealing with the whole thing of, well, there's independent media, but is this person really trustworthy? Is that person really trustworthy? How do we figure it out? So now we're kind of going through all these new problems, and with that, I saw a cultural shift of kind of just, we're going to push back against these what's become extremely polarized on the two sides, and there's been big pushback. It's wild. So like I kind of come from the left, the center left. I'm very much a centrist, but I kind of come from the center left, and I noticed years ago, oh my gosh, there's this horrible problem of anti-Semitism on the left. And I scream about it, and all my friends. I didn't really have Jewish friends growing up. I'm from small town Kansas. I made Jewish friends like my later teenage years and in college, and I would, guys, this is a big problem. Like, how do you not see this? Like, oh no, the problem's on the right. It's always the Nazis. It's the Nazis. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, Nazi came to my town, shot a kid.
Yeah,
Like,
anti-Semitism is universal. It does not discriminate.
Universal. So I saw this
it's
whole
on
thing
both sides. Yeah.
So I saw this whole thing going on, and there are a lot of people like me. Now I know this because social media, and October 7th was a wake-up moment. October 7th was a horrible, terrible, awful.
Yeah, that was the pivot that I was going to say.
Yeah, I think that was a major. And we can get there as well, but I think that was a major moment for it. It was a wake-up moment of, hey, these people like Troy who've been saying there's a big, big problem going on here on the left, they're right. And I think that was a big wake-up moment. And I mean, I experienced it anecdotally. So many friends and family being like, okay, you're right. Like, you're like, so many of them. Because it was something I would say offline.
It's not very satisfactory though. You don't really get that, like, oh, I told you so. Great.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a happy I told you so. It wasn't
doesn't feel very good.
Yeah, it wasn't one of those I told you so moments. But I've seen that. It's more so since kind of like this Joe Rogan uprising, like people on their own side, like attacking their side. And I see it on the right as well. So there's a guy named Josh Eagle, who I'm sure I'll have on here at Maker's Bar. I've had him on my own podcast a handful of times. And he's a classic liberal and a libertarian, so to speak. And he came from the right. He's from Tennessee, and that's kind of where he started. And he spends so much time critiquing the right. And that's just not something you saw pre-Trump, so to speak, whatever that moment was. So there's this kind of cultural moment awakening that happened around this Trump to COVID time. And in my mind, at least, it's where I saw it happening. And I never saw that. But now I see people like him all the time. And I see people like me all the time, even though I describe myself as a centrist. I see people who are self-described progressives being like, I can't have this in my group, my party. And if it's not going to change, well, I'm going to leave. And I think in Britain, you've seen a mass exodus from the Labour Party. 100,000 plus people have left the Labour Party, and all of a sudden they're dominating. They're dominating every poll. Like, they are far and ahead, which for my American audience, which I assume is mostly American, Labour Party is kind of like the Democrats of Britain, and they lost 100,000 plus members, and now they're doing better than ever. And it's crazy to see those polls and those graphs, and that's a huge moment. Like, there's these little indicators, like, okay, we're fixing the crazy. These
just shed the crazy. It's not that hard. Like, I understand there are political considerations at play, and everyone, if it's, let's say, primary season, you have to appeal to your base or whatever. And like, I'm with you. I get it. But just shed the crazy, guys. Like, it's not that hard. I see people like are on the super far left and super far right, and they're like, even them who like on both. Even the fringes have fringes, and even the far right and far left have far righter and far lefter than them. And it's just, even they're like, guys, everyone calm down, everyone relax.
Absolutely.
It's wild. It's really wild stuff.
Anyway, that was kind of like where I saw this cultural shift awakening, and I do think things are changing for the better. I'm also an optimist just by nature, so I do have to say that.
There's a great line, though, is that the best thing about being a pessimist is that you're always right eventually. So. It's a good line. That's the problem, because it's a good line.
It is great.
I'm not a pessimist either, but it's a great line.
It's a great line. But I do tend to try and see hope, which actually yesterday I thought I made a fantastic point in thread, but it didn't catch fire.
Send it to me. I'll tweet it out. I'll X it out to my.
I appreciate it. So let me tell you what I saw, and we'll wrap this up here in the next, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes or so, but
sure.
This would be a good way to do it. Kind of transition there is, I see hope for the future. I don't see it being talked about by algorithms. Algorithms do not push this stuff, and media does not push this stuff, because right now, this is being recorded on April 3rd, 2024. We're arguing about what I believe was a tragic accident, what people on maybe the pro-Palestinian side would call deliberate killing of 4 humanitarian workers in the
It was
Gaza Strip.
maybe even 7.
7. Oh wow! So seven humanitarian workers, and we're arguing about this, and there's other. We're arguing about so many things, and that's what the algorithms want and click. That's the emotional reaction that gets the clicks and gets the clout. But in the background, there's so much actual progress happening, and there's actual leadership going on where the United States, this is all happening at the same time, and no one's heard of this. The United States, Israel, and Arab countries are working together. Read that again. They're working together to set up temporary camps along the coast in Gaza where supply chain is going to be easier to get aid, where they can better keep people safe and fed. There's medical, like temporary hospitals being set up, and this whole thing to try and keep Gazans safe going while ridding Gaza of Hamas control. And then in Israel, there's also all these protests. So when I talk to Israelis on the ground in person, or whether it's via social media, they're still divided as ever, just like Americans on most things, right? And there seems to be 2 things that are pretty damn aligned on, which is Hamas can't stay, and Netanyahu also can't stay. Netanyahu has to get going. And there's all these protests for new leadership, for new change, and for a change of leadership and a change of the guard, and someone that can provide hope for the future. And then all of a sudden, literally all of a sudden, the PA, they just renounced Iran. They just renounced Hamas. They're talking about finally repealing the Martyrs Fund, Pay for Slave Fund, that if you get killed, arrested, while trying to kill Jews, they'll pay you, they'll pay your family for life. Big impediment to peace, in my opinion. And I've seen people, big time people, Max Blumenthal comes to mind, say this doesn't even exist. It's not even real. And they're acknowledging it's, they've always acknowledged it's real. The PAs haven't lied about it. But they're acknowledging it. They're acknowledging it's a problem, and they're saying it's going to go away. So there's this sliver of, wait, we have a chance here. Maybe it's going to take.
Yeah, listen, I share your optimism. Not necessarily about the PA. I think they're kind of trying to play the West, but we can get into that. But I don't want to put a damper on the optimistic message, because I actually do genuinely agree with you that there's this is a moment where the fate of Israel and the Palestinians also obviously this is like a moment that people are going to look back on and they're going to say, wow, okay, April 2024. This is when some stuff happened. So I do share your optimism and your hope. I think hopefully we can get out of this somehow, everyone happier and stronger than before. Yeah. Just not about the PA specifically.
Yeah, okay.
Just because I've done too much research on them to listen. I hope that, but this is one of those moments. This is one of those moments where I really hope that I'm wrong. I really hope that I'm wrong.
Well, I've heard that a lot too. So, like, again, optimist here, and even I've had my moments of days of, oh my gosh, how does this get better? How do we find peace? Where is the end goal, and how does this work? Even so, Dr. Enoch Wilf has really helped my mindset with that. I've talked to her once. She's incredible. I think she's a rational peace activist, like an actual rational, like, here's how we do this. Peace activist, and I kind of go, there's some people I go to and I read their works when I kind of get in that mindset of how do we do this, and like, oh my gosh, it's very black flowing moments. So I'm not even saying you're wrong. I do want to point out though, there are clear steps that can and appear to be are being made to get to peace and for a brighter future. And it's because of everyone, like you said before. It's not this one thing, but it's people like you. It's media. We can change the way we do things in school with law. It's like it's the whole of society that we can get there. We can get the change, and we can hopefully one day find peace in that region and safety and security and stability for all people in the region. Because right now, I think there's basically for none.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I mean, listen, from your mouth to God's ears, and then to reality.
I hope so. But for the end of this podcast here, let's keep it on you. How do you see your career, your next steps here going the next 6 months, few years? What is it that you're working on that you're hoping to grow into and accomplish here?
I have no clue. It's funny. I can be very meticulous when it comes to my work, and then very just kind of spontaneous and spur of the moment when it comes to my professional life. So I don't really know. I'm always looking for the next challenge, the next sort of investigation or expose to break, to expose sort of like the workings behind various organizations or media outlets or whatever. I don't even know how to describe it, what I've been doing on the internet. So I'm always looking for my next challenge. I'm always thinking about my next article. I have a daughter and a son, and I'm just also trying to, in the midst of war and in the midst of all my professional life and all my Twitter stuff, to try to somehow raise them. It's difficult. It's more difficult than probably solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is raising a family. I think most parents would agree. I don't know. I don't know. But hopefully you'll have me on again to talk about it.
Talk about where it was. Absolutely. Whether it be Maker's Bar, whether it be a space call, I would definitely want to talk to you more and more and keep in touch. I love seeing your work.
Thank you.
It's one of the things that really helps keep my mind, as I was mentioning before, keep my mindset in the right place, and knowing that there's people that really are doing work to try and get to a better place, step by step, grueling step by step, slow progress.
It's a slog.
Yeah, it really
but we'll get there.
But yeah, and with people like you, many people like you will get there. I appreciate it. And I'm excited for the day to come. Matis Yahoo one day, so
absolutely.
I do think we'll see that day.
Absolutely. Troy, next time I'm interviewing you on Maker's Bar, because you're the leader here. You're the one who's bringing all these people together. Shout out to Troy. Guys, Troy, I don't like this format that you talk about other people. We're going to have an episode about you one day. I think this is
all right. That sounds good. I appreciate it. I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon, very soon, probably on Twitter, but again, soon here on a podcast platform. And next time I'm in Israel, I'll be sure to come find you for a beer.
Absolutely. Definitely. You're buying.
Thank you for your time. And actually, I'm going to ask you to hold on here for 1 second after
absolutely.
I hit recording. But again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. And where can everyone find you on different social medias and different
I am only on X at the moment at what is it called in English? Strudel. The at.
Yes.
Yeah, the at symbol. What is it called in English? I've been published in major American publications. I do not know what the word for that symbol is. Okay, good. So I'm not the only one. So anyway, that thing at Fischberger, EFISCHBERGER. I'm not active on other social media platforms at the moment. If someone can make a compelling case that I should join another social media platform, I'm happy to consider it. But as of now, I just do not have the emotional endurance.
Yeah, I don't know if I can make a case, especially because you are a writer. Also, everyone you can find his work, as I mentioned. In Wall Street Journal, The Hill, New York Times, I believe, New York Daily.
Not the Times yet. I've probably been blacklisted from there.
Yeah, well,
I would be shocked if they ever take me. I mean, I'm happy to, but it might be about how the Times runs op-eds by Hamas leaders and leaders from the Taliban. That might be the subject of the op-ed in the Times. So
yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of but I've talked to people who on the other side who are also not.
They have amazing reporters there. Though. Absolutely, amazing reporters and writers there. Though.
Yes, they do. Absolutely, there are.
And on that illustrious note, before we put our feet any further in our in our mouths.
Yes, I can let you go. Again, thank you so much for the time.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. Keep up the great work and just trying to help as you can.
You too. Thanks for having me.